Hey guys, this is Danny Boy. This is the final episode in this series, this Witch Doctor Skills series, this primer. So now I'm going to talk about passives. So to start, let's talk about Circle of Life. Whenever an enemy dies within 12 yards, you have a 5% chance, just a chance, that you get a zombie dog. And that range is extended by items that increase your gold pickup radius. 12 yards is fairly decent, though it's not that far. They don't have to be right next to you, but they have to be pretty close to you in order for that to actually work. So it's definitely advised that you do increase your gold pickup radius if you want to use Circle of Life. Basically, if you're going to use Circle of Life, it's going to be as part of a Gruesome Feast build to give you extra intelligence from health globes, and what I'm talking about is when they die with Final Gift, you can get an extra chance of getting health globes, so more health globes equals more intelligence equals more damage. You could also use it as part of a zombie dog sacrifice build. Blow them up. Or just as possibly some additional damage with Fierce Loyalty through the Thorns bonus, or just additional damage through the actual zombie dogs with Rabid Dogs or Burning Dogs, or just extra survivability for you with Lifelink or Leeching Beasts. But I should mention that the whole zombie dog thing doesn't really work very well in practice, even if you stack Circle of Life plus de-evolution through Mass Confusion, plus Next of Kin through Sacrifice, and finally Boogeyman through Big Bad Voodoo. It doesn't really work, mainly because no matter what, you have a maximum of 4 dogs. If you take Zombie Handler, you can have 4 out. Otherwise, you have a maximum of 3, and you can never have more than that. If you summon more dogs when you already have dogs up, if you're already at 3 or 4, you'll just replace your current dogs, and they'll be at full health. You can never have more than that, so in my opinion, it doesn't really work very well in practice. Next up, we have Jungle Fortitude. Jungle Fortitude is 20% damage reduction. That's about 1,000 armor, a little more than 1,000 armor. Jungle Fortitude, the damage reduction from Jungle Fortitude makes Witch Doctors potentially far tankier, I shouldn't say tankier, but they can take more hits than Wizards or Demon Hunters. They are one of the meteor casters, just in addition to their base damage reduction from armor, from shields, and also the damage reduction you can get from Bad Medicine can make you take quite a few more hits than the other classes, the other caster classes in Inferno. So very, very powerful. As I said, like 1,000 armor. Highly recommend you take Jungle Fortitude. I would go so far as to say it's not mandatory, but you really, really should have Jungle Fortitude in your build throughout your character's entire career. It's one of the first passes you get, very potent. Spiritual Attunement can help you with your mana issues. It gives you 20% more mana, and you regenerate 1% of your max mana per second. Now, I'll also quickly talk about Blood Ritual. Blood Ritual makes attacks cost 15% of your... Rather, 15% of mana is paid with life, and you regenerate 1% of your max life per second. So let me just show you these passives in practice and give you a comparison. First, let's set a baseline. So let's see how long it takes for zombie bears to drain my mana with Spiritual Attunement. Now, let's compare the same ability with Blood Ritual. So, as you can see, the 1% healing it gives you more than makes up for the effect it has on my health. The health cost is pretty negligible in practice. So now, let's compare Blood Ritual with Spiritual Attunement, stacking both. Now, let's see how long it takes for me to regenerate enough mana from 0 mana, or as close to 0 as I can get it, to being able to cast Zombie Bears again. So first with just base mana, which would be the same with Blood Ritual, versus Spiritual Attunement. I could also just compare how long it takes me to regenerate mana from 0 to full with base versus with Spiritual Attunement, but that will take quite a while. And for all intents and purposes, you're not concerned with how long it takes you to regenerate full mana, you're concerned with how long it's going to be until you can cast a spell again. So that is going to be my metric. Okay. And next with Spiritual Attunement.
Mana.
Really, the two abilities are quite comparable. At the end of the day, you'll be able to get maybe one more cast off with Blood Ritual or so, versus just regenerating your mana faster out of combat with Spiritual Attunement, or in combat or whatever with Spiritual Attunement. So they're quite comparable. You could use one, the other, or stack them both. But basically, Blood Ritual will give you maybe one more cast, and Spiritual Attunement will help you regenerate mana faster so you can cast again, but they're very comparable. Next up is Gruesome Feast. Gruesome Feast, whenever you're healed by a health club, you get 10% of your max mana, so you also get mana back when you use Gruesome Feast. Helpful if you're just kind of steamrolling through everything, and it will keep your mana topped off between fights. And then, more importantly, 10% bonus intelligence for 10 seconds. So that can stack up to 50% bonus intelligence. That is a significant amount of damage on a 5-stack. That's difficult to obtain, though. I already talked about it to an extent. Just getting extra health globes through your own abilities can be helpful. Grouping with a barbarian. Barbarians have several runes and abilities that make health globes drop more frequently, so you can also try that. Another way to get health globes that I didn't mention is Grasp of the Dead with Death is Life. Enemies have a chance to produce health globes when they die in Death is Life on Grasp of the Dead. You can try to use it to its potential and get a lot of bonus intelligence and a lot of extra damage that way, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to do to maintain a 5-stack. You only have 10 seconds on the buff, but potentially quite powerful, and there is support for this passive within the Witch Doctor, and especially if you're grouping with the Barbarian, that will help you out and sacrifice some of his own damage to give you more health globes. He even has passives like Pound of Flesh that help him with health globes and whatever as well. So next up is Bad Medicine. Bad Medicine, you deal poison damage to an enemy, their damage is reduced by 20% for 3 seconds. So it's essentially 20% additional damage reduction. The big difference being that this will also help your party members, which can be potentially quite useful, but I should note that it's whenever you deal poison damage, not party members, so you have to deal the poison damage, so you actually have to have poison abilities within your build, which is not hard to do. Zombie Bears does poison damage, Splinters does poison damage. Those are some ways, but then again, it only lasts for 3 seconds. So you want something that persistently poisons enemies. And generally speaking, you want it to be an entire group of enemies. So Splinters doesn't really poison an entire group of enemies. Zombie Bears does, but it might not hit everybody, and it's just as long as you're essentially channeling the Zombie Bear. So once you're out of mana, they're not going to be poisoned anymore. A great choice to keep enemies poisoned is Locust Swarm. It spreads to entire groups of enemies. It lasts for 8 seconds. That will give you a decent amount of time of uptime on enemies being poisoned. Another excellent choice is, well, Acid Cloud obviously poisons enemies, but it only lasts 3 seconds for its dot generally, so that's not really helpful. Barring Slow Burn, which makes it 6 seconds, that's still not really as long as we want, and it's not an ability that you can spam non-stop because it's so expensive. Another good option is Gargantuan, Big Stinker. Big Stinker just gives him a poison aura, so all enemies around him will just be poisoned perpetually until he dies or they die. It's a good way to keep enemies poisoned for long periods of time. Bad Medicine is definitely an excellent choice for additional survivability, but solo, you should always take Jungle Fortitude over Bad Medicine, because Jungle Fortitude is always up 100% of the time. Solo, you can stack them together if you're using good poison abilities that keep enemies poisoned for long periods of time, but always Jungle Fortitude. Bad Medicine, sometimes if you're having survivability issues, especially in Inferno. And in a party, Bad Medicine certainly does help them, your party members, but again, it's not going to have 100% uptime, and you need to actually have poison abilities in your build that will keep enemies poisoned, large numbers of enemies, generally speaking, unless you're just killing a boss consistently. Otherwise, you're still better off just with Jungle Fortitude to keep yourself up. And note that in parties, no class is balanced around the assumption that they have Bad Medicine. It will make their life easier, but Wizards and Demon Hunters in Inferno generally build themselves to just get one shot anyway. 20% damage reduction isn't going to solve that problem, and Monks and Barbarians generally already have enough survivability to keep themselves up. Monks more so than Barbarians. Monks are very tanky. Moving on, I've already talked about Blood Ritual. Next is Zombie Handler. I talked about this briefly as well. It gives you 4 zombie dogs rather than 3, which is nice, and it increases the health of your zombie dogs and Gargantuan by 20%. Unfortunately, without significant gear, and certainly without Fierce Loyalty, your zombie dogs are going to get one shot, even with 20% increased health. Maybe not one shot, but they're going to die so quickly that they may as well get one shot. So it's not really going to make a tremendous difference for your dogs until you have enough gear, because your pets do scale with your gear, to make them survivable. And that's going to take a lot of gear, by the way. You're going to be well into Inferno before you're at that point. Even then, they die extremely, extremely quickly. If you want to improve the survivability of your Gargantuan, which will not get one shot necessarily in Inferno, even entry in Inferno, especially if you have some other passives and skills to help back him up, like Hedge Magic on Hex, or certainly Fierce Loyalty is very helpful. But this will help your Gargantuan out more so than your dogs, because he just has more health to begin with, so that 20% helps him more. Next is Pierce the Veil, an excellent choice for basically all builds, even very mana-hungry builds. All your damage is increased by 20%, your mana costs are increased by 30%. Now, for mana-hungry builds, it's wise to use this in combination with, say, something like Vision Quest. Blood Ritual and Spiritual Attunement aren't going to make up enough of the difference to counteract Pierce the Veil because of its massive mana cost increased. This is an extremely good talent to use, or rather passive to use, with spammable abilities that are essentially free, like Splinters on Poison Dart, or even Corpse Spiders when leveling up, Plague of Toads, Rain of Toads, Firebomb, Ghost Bomb, or Roll the Bones, or whatever. Fire Bats, Dire Bats is pretty expensive, so you're looking at a big mana cost increase here, to the point that it's not going to be as spammable as it normally would be, but still, Locust Swarm is expensive, but it's a one-time cost. It's very useful for the vast majority of abilities. Even Zombie Bears is part of a Vision Quest build. Spirit Barrage with Spirit is Willing. Corpse Bomb, again, is really expensive, so not so much for that one, or just Acid Cloud in general. While the zombies pile on Dead Rush, the list goes on. You can also counteract this effect with Rain Dance on Big Bad Voodoo quite easily. So very, very powerful. 20% increased damage, honestly, is amazing. So you want this in your build. You want this in your build. You want to do whatever you can to put this in your build, because a 20% damage increase is incredibly substantial. So if at all possible, you want to get Pierce the Veil in your build, and you want to counteract it with Big Bad Voodoo or Vision Quest, or just mana regen from gear, or use a free ability like Splinters that it won't matter to begin with. Next up, we have Fetish Sycophants. Fetish Sycophants gives you a 3% chance to summon a dagger-wielding fetish to fight by your side when you cast a Physical Realm spell. Now, that actually, it's when you cast a Physical Realm spell and deal damage. If you just spam an ability in town, or even outside of town, you won't get any fetishes. You have to actually deal damage to enemies with your spell. You want an ability that's very spammy, that you'll cast frequently in order to maximize this passive. So Locust Swarm's a bad choice because you only cast it once basically per combat. Acid Cloud you also spam, but it's so expensive I can't really recommend it for its damage. Even Corpse Bomb, and Wall of Zombies has a 25-second cooldown. So basically Poison Dart, Plague of Toad, Zombie Charger, Corpse Spiders, Fire Bats, and Firebomb, with an emphasis on free abilities that you spam a ton, like Poison Dart, Splinters, or Firebomb, or Corpse Spiders. I mean, I know they're not free, but eventually you'll have enough mana regen that they are free. And then also channeled abilities like Rain of Toads, Zombie Bears, Fire Bats, the Inferno thing. I'm not sure what the maximum number of fetishes you can have out is, but it's something like 3 or 4. I think it might be the same as your Zombie Dogs. I want to say it's 3. Not totally sure. I don't think I've ever had more than... Certainly not ever had more than 4 out at any given time, but you can have more than 1 out. They last a minute. They're distractions. There's some supplementary damage, and they're fun. They're flavorful. Unfortunately, you do have better choices. Pierce the Veil is infinitely better than Fetish Sycophants. Jungle Fortitude is also a much better choice. And leveling up, it's fun, and I'd love to use it, but really, in terms of optimization, you have better choices than Fetish Sycophants. Really fun passive, though. Next up is Spirit Vessel. It reduces the cooldown of your Horrify, Spirit Walk, and Soul Harvest spells by 2 seconds, so that's significant for all of them. I believe that reduces Horrify down to 18, Spirit Walk down to 13, and Soul Harvest down to 13, which is nice. It allows you to use Spirit Walk more often, Horrify more often, and if you didn't have, say you only hit 4 targets or 3 targets or whatever with your last Soul Harvest, well, that's 2 seconds sooner that you can cast it again and get your 5 stack, or use it with Siphon to heal you more often, or whatever. So that's definitely significant. It also gives you, just when you die, you'll become immune for 3 seconds to damage, and you'll heal up to 10% of your maximum life once every minute and a half, so it's a cheat death mechanic. A lot of players say that this is mandatory in Inferno. It's not mandatory. It's certainly helpful, But death is not a big deal in Inferno, generally speaking. If you're dying so much that you need this in Inferno, then you're undergeared and your Nephilim Valor is going to fall off anyway because you're dying so frequently. One death every minute and a half is not a big deal as far as that goes. Now, it's certainly nice to shave off 2 seconds on Spirit Walk and Horrify and whatever, but that's still, it's not mandatory. It's definitely nice, but it's not mandatory. You're not doing it wrong in Inferno if you don't have Spirit Vessel in your build, despite what some people will tell you. There are other competitive choices with Spirit Vessel. The only time I would say this is strictly necessary is it's certainly helpful on bosses, but then again, you really shouldn't need this to beat a boss. So, personally, I don't think it's mandatory. Your mileage may vary. Next up is Rush of Essence. It's certainly a good choice, though. It's absolutely a good passive. It's a very competitive choice. Rush of Essence, it refunds 30% of the mana cost of a set list of spells over 10 seconds. Really, the only spell that... Well, there's a couple spells I would use it with. I'd use it with Haunt to give it a much better mana return ratio if you're using Draining Spirit. And I would use it with Spirit Barrage along with the Spirit is Willing to make Spirit Barrage very, very cheap and have a great mana to damage ratio against single targets. Other than that, though, Mass Confusion, use it once a minute, so who cares? Horrify is once every 20 seconds, so who cares? Soul Harvest is cheap, I mean, who cares? And the Spirit Walk is also cheap, so who cares? Next is Vision Quest. Entire builds are based around this. Vision Quest is anytime you have 4 or more skills on cooldown, your mana regeneration is increased by 30%. So note my mana regen before Vision Quest. I'm not using any mana passives.
I need mana.
And now after Vision Quest with 4 abilities on cooldown. Pretty significant stuff.
Need more mana.
And then just when I'm done channeling. Very, very big difference. So, Vision Quest builds. Very, very powerful. A great alternative. A superior alternative, really, to Spiritual Attunement and Blood Ritual. However, it does require you to have 4 abilities in your build with long cooldowns and to basically keep at least 2 of them, along with Soul Harvest and Spirit Walk, which are basically mandatory for all builds, on cooldown in perpetuity so that you have enough mana to constantly cast your expensive spells. So it is a build in and of itself. It's not the most entertaining build in the world, in my opinion, but what do I know? Next up, Fierce Loyalty. Fierce Loyalty makes your pets inherit 100% of your Thorns and Life Regeneration items. Note your Life Regeneration items, so I believe that does not include things like Blood Ritual, the 1% per second, or say the Templar's Health Regen Aura, or even Health Regen bonuses from other party members. Not totally 100% sure on that, but it does specifically say items, but the tooltip could be incorrect. It wouldn't be the first time. So just keep that in mind either way. And basically, if you really want to use a Gargantuan in Inferno, you really should have Fierce Loyalty, and you should have a good amount, like maybe 200 to 300 at least, health regen on your gear, just as an extra stat to help keep him up. And it does have a very noticeable effect on his survivability. On your mongrels, they have so little health to begin with that it's not going to make much of a difference on your zombie dogs. But on your Gargantuan, it does have a nice effect on him, especially when you stack more and more life regen. And more life regen can help you, too. I mean, if you have 1,000 life regen and you have 50,000 health, which would be a lot for a Witch Doctor, generally you want to also emphasize resists in Inferno. But if you had 50,000 health and 1,000 life regen, you're looking at a full health bar with no other outside factors in less than a minute, so that's pretty substantial. But that's also a lot of health regen and a lot of health. But with less health than you had 1,000 health regen, it would be even more substantial. So that also is kind of a build in and of itself to really try to get the Gargantuan up and about and useful as a tank in Inferno. And also, if you can, emphasizing Thorns to make enemies take more damage when they hit him as well, but that does take a lot of Thorns damage to stack up. Also note that your Gargantuan does scale with your stats and his health improves and what have you. So just something to keep in mind. I use this as part of my Headhunter build, which emphasizes keeping the Gargantuan up and using him as a tank. Next up is Grave Injustice. Grave Injustice, whenever an enemy dies within 8 yards, which is a very short range, it's about twice melee range, if that, you regain 1% of your maximum life and mana, and the cooldown on all of your abilities is reduced by 1 second, which can be quite powerful. I mean, you can shave off a lot of seconds on your cooldowns and get a bunch of health and mana back, but this really requires you to stack increased gold pickup radius. 8 yards is so small that you're not going to be at that range for the vast majority of enemies you face. Even in a zombie bears build, most enemies are going to be beyond 8 yards. I mean, they're not going to be standing on top of you, generally speaking. And certainly if you're spamming dire bats and splinters or something longer ranged, they're not going to be anywhere near 8 yards. So to make use of this, you absolutely need to get it up to something like 20 yards. To really get the most out of Grave Injustice, 20, 24 yards would definitely be a good butter zone. So it's an option. Finally, we have Tribal Rites. Tribal Rites reduces the cooldown on Fetish Army, Big Bad Voodoo, and Hex by 25%. So Fetish Army and Big Bad Voodoo have a 2-minute cooldown at base. So 25% of 120 seconds is 30 seconds, so you would shave off 30 seconds and reduce their cooldowns to 90 seconds. So that's a substantial increase on uptime. Hex has benefited less so. It does give you 100% uptime on your Fetish Shaman. Normally it would be 12 seconds with 3 seconds of downtime because it has a 15-second cooldown. Well, if you shave 25% off of Hex, 25% of 15 seconds is 3.75. 3.75, or rather 15 minus 3.75 would be 11.25. So you would have 100% uptime on your Fetish. But that's not really necessary. The 3 seconds, I mean, who cares? It's so short, it's insignificant. So that is, I believe, all the passives. And I think that's basically the guide. That is the primer. So, thanks for watching, and this is going to be it. So, stay tuned for other stuff, non-Witch Doctor guide stuff, and leave comments and feedback, ask questions, I'll answer them. Sub if you want to see more Diablo 3 or other games. I'm going to be moving on to another game now. And have a good one.